as a sport, because the issue here in Austria, we are still not a sport. I mean, no one legally qualified tells us what a sport is in a legal way. However, they do not accept it because there are stakeholders, the traditional stakeholders in sports, who does not want esports to become a sport, and it has nothing to do with the type of venture, the type of exercise you do, etc. But it's mostly related to money, because we have a lot of financial support, and if we would recognize esports as sport, then they would be afraid that the funding would be less for traditional sports, and they are already afraid because the members, and that's what I also believe, one day esport will be generally the second biggest thing next to football. It's already becoming more and more. In my profession, I see kids nowadays wanting, and they idolize esport players, and kids also can make really good money. So I had a client, a 17-year-old kid, he played the Fortnite World Championship, and he made 3 million in one tournament with his duo partner in New York. So, which also comes with a lot of legal challenges in this regard, because we have specific rules on taxation for sportsmen, which are very favorable for sportsmen. But do we treat esports players the same? Because then, at the moment, we do not treat them the same. And in this working group, we have been discussing very intensely, and the outcome so far has been that they want us to be not under the Ministry of Sports, but under the Ministry of Digitization, and to be something specific, something else. So that's the idea, the political idea behind this for now. Yeah, maybe.
Peter, do you have anything to add
yes,
here?
Yes, of course, I could talk for ages. But I think in short, my gut feeling tells me that esports will never be recognized as traditional sports simply because of the role of the game publishers. So I think there are so many stakeholders within this industry with the game publishers at the top who do it for money, because this is a business, whereas sports roots in amateurism, only the top end of traditional sports is very business driven. And therefore I see, actually from experience, I don't see that there ever would be an international recognized body which would be able to govern esports like FIFA governs football. But at the same time, I agree with all the issues which were raised here, because we also face them in our practice. And I think all the issues together concern integrity, the level of playing field. And I mean, at the end of the day, because each esports tournament is a product, and players and teams must be very clear, as do sponsors, investors and fans, that if there is a game, if there is a tournament, then each participant has the same chance to win. So there is no way for match fixing, the product is not compromised, there is no way for doping, and there is no way for software cheating, which are all present. And what I still would like to mention here is that if esports would be dragged under the realm of sports, then a couple of issues could be solved all of a sudden. For example, because if esports would be a traditional sport, and the VADA code would automatically extend to it if it is recognized at the top end, so then that issue would be solved, but that would not work. And also I agree with all the points here, because we face in Hungary that if you are a traditional sport, you get the same funding as other sports do. But then there is a rivalry, because of course esports would not be, most probably would be not in the first place to be funded. So, and if sports would be funded, then other sports would suffer, because they would lose that portion of funding. And just when it comes to integrity, just last final point, the issue that we see here is that, for example, if a player or team cheats in one of the tournaments, in the first place, at the second and third tier of esports tournament, like in traditional sports, where most of the cheating happens, because that's the space where player does not earn real prize money. It's simply hard to detect. And even if you detect cheating, then one tournament organizer can ban that player. They can have the regulations in place. They can have the resources to impose sanctions. But For example, if the game is online, first, it's not easy to identify who have cheated. And second, even if you punish that person, even if you ban it, there is nothing to prevent him to start or play in another competition. So there are a lot of cause of issues here. This is just what have popped into my mind.
And I was wondering, as you said, do we have already enough data available, even if, for instance, tomorrow Germany said we also cover esports betting, or we consider those specifics and technical cheating and so on. Would it be feasible from the data collection perspective? Would it be feasible from the enforcement perspective to do a proper regulation? I mean, we have, as we already heard, quite a couple of jurisdictions who have an explicit esports betting regulation. How do they do it? How do they enforce? How do they handle it?
So I only can say for Germany, right now at the moment it's illegal to bet on esports. I think it should become legal because we have to keep the legal market as attractive as possible, especially with an increasing illegal market. And I think one solution maybe could be an advisory board at the GGL, the new supervision authority for esports, which and it's I think 7 or 10 people, that's the regular thing, and they discuss all the esports events and all the esports tournaments and choose on which it's legal to bet, it's safe to bet, and have all the aspects that you already mentioned in common and put it into together. And so that would be one solution, but just to add one big difference, because that wasn't mentioned before here on the panel, between esports and sports is, I think, the role of the publisher. And so if we want to start, or if you want to do, well, I think it was already mentioned, but I just want to bring it up again, because if we want to try make a football tournament tomorrow here, and nobody can do anything against it, but if we want to do a FIFA Ultimate tournament here, we need the permission from Electronic Arts, and that's one big difference, and I think that's the main reason why Germany still says e-sport is not sport. It's not the same.
So we have still a long road to go. What interests me also, Gail, there are many new games popping up. How are the traders and how are traders trained to compile odds? What can you tell us a little bit from behind the scenes of trading esports odds?
That's an interesting question. Thank you for that. I won't disclose all of the secrets, but I give you some of the. First of all, one of the things that, if you go in better offices, one thing that you can clearly identify who are the traders for esports. We have like about 50 of them. All of them are very distinguished. They have their hoodies with the logo of their favorite, team in the back. And they're walking like that, focusing with themselves. So you can really clear up and say these guys are So as a principle, we never bring somebody to trade esport who's not coming from the esport background. He must be a player. Most of them are really, the moment they stop trading, they go to play, and vice versa. This is their life. They live in business. That I'm not exaggerating by this statement. So these are the kind of people, so they know the material, they know the teams, they know the games, they know the nuances. They provide this added value from this background. But there is another thing that's making esport trading very unique, and is the fact that the amount of data is, uncomparable to anything else. We are working only with official data providers, or Base and Grid and 3 others that provide you direct connection to the servers of the game. And we're talking about a single event will generate a few millions of data points. Okay, so no trader can manually manage that. So here, when we are involving our algorithms, which are proprietary IP, and we talked before the discussion about AI and machine learning, this is the place that we think that we can generate some, also in the future, some competitive advantage in order to accumulate in real time all of this massive amount of data with the touch of the trader that have this gut feeling about what's going on. And basically that's it. That's the secret sauce.
How important is AI here when it comes to compiling those odds?
So it's absolutely fundamental because of the, first of all, the massive amount of data, because of the fact that you can benefit some historical databases, that you can train some machine learning algorithms about specific individuals and specific teams, to get some better profiling and better segmentation of each one of their moves and how it should impact the. So I think that unlike other sports, in esports you see AI in the trading much more involved and much more influencing the overall results.
So we've heard now already, okay, esports is definitely not like any other sports. We have to take into consideration technical cheating, then what you mentioned, I forgot it already, and also that the target group is a very young one. So people start to game much earlier than they start to gamble in general terms. And the recent study, which more or less assessed, I think, 30 studies from 8 countries, mostly English-speaking countries, they also advise to regulate betting on esports. They even call it gambling on esports differently, because they say it's mainly young males. They score very high on problematic gambling scales, and they very often come from migrant families and do not speak primarily English in their homes, and they would also recommend to regulate it differently. What's your stance? How would you suggest to ideally regulate specifically esports? All of you, please tell me what your ideas are in this regard.
So what I can make very short, what I already mentioned is, for example, the advisory board at the supervision authority, because I think that the supervision authority is responsible to that, and they have to take a look, and maybe it's even possible with the advisory board for esports to regulate loot boxes, and so that would be a solution, I think, for the near future, because it could start tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, I think like in everything that is new to the regulator, I highly advise the regulator to learn this domain to the very details. It's very unique, so if you regulated the football before, basketball, you are very good at that, it's not enough. So do your homework and take it as a different domain when you start regulating that, and I guess it will be my best recommendation.
Urim?
When we speak about regulations in the esports industry, so they were to distinguish between loot boxes, which personally I believe have to be treated differently, and then there's this traditional betting on esports events. We also in this working group, expert group of the ministry, we reviewed this, and we came actually to the conclusion that there's already the specific regulation in place. So you're able, because it's also my partner, Arthur Stadler, told you, in Austria, we distinguish between betting and gambling, and in betting we differentiate between sports betting and also between social betting. So we have 9 specific federal regulations, federal states in Austria. In 6 of those 9 you can do social bets. Personally, also when we legally reviewed it, we came also to the conclusion that legally it could also be construed as sports betting in accordance to the law. For example, it was in this specific case we looked into the sports betting law of Lower Austria. So when it comes to betting, I feel like we are in place, like you have just to educate people, because there are also different types of betting. There's this betting with money, but then there's this unregulated betting in esports with so-called skin betting, where you do not put you do not pay money, but you have skins which you probably bought out of loot boxes, and you bet with those. So this is concerning betting. Concerning loot boxes, it's a very difficult topic actually, because like we reviewed a few examples of loot boxes with different games, and we came to the conclusion in Austria for now, because that we cannot impose a general ban on loot boxes. However, if it is not regulated, loot boxes which indicate that they are gambling elements, actually, and that's all the direction it's going. It's considered gambling, and that's why also recently civil court, an upper civil court in Austria decided that it's gambling, and EA and Sony were required to pay the player all the money. It was roughly 11K, which this player spent on, because FIFA, it was in FIFA, it's a football game, virtual football game where you buy these packs, and every year there's a new game. So he was required to pay. So he received 11K back of all the money he had paid in this year. So this is just a brief overview. Maybe we can go over in detail, but I don't know.
Peter, and then just for me, it seems there are really specificities, and if I had to recommend something to a regulator, I would really break it down and only recommend to really regulate specifically, which is absolutely needed to regulate specifically, because everything else would need a lot of time. And also when we look at the US or Brazil, where they more or less make some tricks so that you can think it's also esports betting regulation. Peter, what would you regulate specifically and really just so to get it done as quickly as possible? I mean, I find the idea of a committee very, very nice. Only these costs, yeah? So is this all realistic, or is it just about this technical cheating in the end?
I think so. I'm rather free market person, but of course regulation should also be in place. I think so overall, I believe loot boxes can be covered by general gambling laws, as we have seen in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in Sweden, and in several jurisdictions. Also, I don't think so that anyone could be able to regulate loot boxes overall, because each loot box has different features. And then if we talk about it, then it's like, you know, in any other form of life, in any other phenomena, social phenomena, because then there are the lawyers who can then interpret the existing laws to a specific situation. However, if you consider some specifics, if you consider who usually play esports, who usually buy loot boxes, either with real currency or with virtual money, they are young, they are male, they can be addicted. So I think somehow legal guardians should be back into the picture. Simply, for example, just enable the feature of buying something in game, or for example, spending limits could be implemented. That simply you cannot buy more after you have reached certain limits. And they also believe in education. For example, we can see in much older, we have just discussed after lunch, we can see much major industries like tobacco, alcohol, and similar industries where they have some advertising bans, where they have some information obligations. So kind of indirect and direct education could also be helpful. So I think that is how, and this is also, I have just read how the UK Interactive Entertainment, in consultation with the digital department of the EU government, looked at the issue, and they were right after the same points, but they are still also in just thinking about how to regulate it, although I think the first white paper they issued 4 or 5 years ago, because it's not an easy issue to really regulate specifically.
But that explains why it takes time and why so many regulators in the end say, oh, I don't want to. So what are the biggest challenges to overcome till we have this issue solved? Please go ahead.
Just a general question in the public. Does everyone know what loot boxes are, actually? Maybe does anyone not know what loot boxes are? Okay, good. So, I actually quite like what you suggested, how to regulate. And I have also some more suggestions. So imposing bans and caps how much you can spend. But you should also make it more transparent. For example, indicate the probabilities of the drop rates of each digital item, and also what we suggested in this working group to because firstly, most of the loot boxes cannot be bought with fiat money. You have, like when you go to the casino, you have to change it in in-game currency, and then with that you're going to buy it, which you kind of lose control also how much money you spend. That's why we suggested that you always show the pendant in euros or in dollars. And yeah, each game should be also indicated that has loot boxes. And we actually made a similar suggestion concerning this committee, because what we also felt is a problem was in Austria when a tournament organizer who wants to do an esports event exhibition, he needs to get approval by the municipality. And oftentimes they have difficulty that you are not allowed to have a gambling event. So tournament organizers will have to come with an expert witness on each game that this is not gambling. Because gambling in Austria is monopolized. You are not allowed, even if you have a license to offer it. So the idea was that we have a committee who also keeps a list with esport titles which are not considered gambling because they are skill games. Because the thing is, we need to educate also the government bodies to which games are real, because oftentimes they never, if they are not playing by themselves, or the husband or own children, they do not know what's going on in these events. That is also one suggestion, and we feel also very confident that a committee which gives recommendations and has a list which they update would help. And the challenges, policy-wise, I can only speak maybe for Austria. I do not believe that, although we made a lot of progress and we provided them a very good suggestion, now they need to get working and finally start implementing the suggestion which we suggested to them. However, we will have elections in 1 year, and I don't believe that it's going to happen this year. So this is one problem.
So I take also from this panel, we need specific esports regulations for betting for certain aspects of it, and we need a better definition for loot boxes for each and every loot box, so there is no general approach to loot boxes, but very individual depending on how the loot box is constructed. And so those two things, to break it down, apart from education, is what needs to be done in the near future. So thank you very much for being with me, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. You did a good job today. 2 panels, and she has a panel tomorrow as well.